Well, good morning. I wanted to welcome you to our presentation today, which is using effective display and sales techniques to increase the success that you expect to have here at the SMART Show. My name is Larry Johnson, and I'm Senior Vice President of a company called Pacific Northern in Dallas, Texas. We're the world's largest manufacturer of jewelry displays. I'm also the author of this book, A Complete Guide to Effective Jewelry Display. Doesn't say anything about jewelry design, so it's only on how to display the merchandise correctly. I also write a column every month for In-Store Magazine on visual merchandising and display techniques. So my goal here today is to be able to try to share with you some ideas on how you might organize your experience here at the show in order to get the most out of it. What we see quite often is there's a disconnect between what the exhibitors, and this initial presentation was primarily designed for exhibitors here at the show to learn how to do a better job of appealing to the retailers who attend. So that's what we're going to talk about primarily today. This afternoon session goes a little more to some of the points that you raised before about how to increase the effectiveness and professionalism of the display. Like previews of coming attractions, that's this afternoon at 2, and that is a 5-step, 10-week program on how to improve the way that the showcases are organized in order to sell more merchandise. It's like an exercise program. You embark upon it, you do a different step for 2 weeks, and at the end of 10 weeks, you've got the whole thing done. But today we're going to talk primarily about exhibiting here at the show and how to organize yourself to make the most of that. I would say, however, an awfully lot of what we're going to talk about is applicable to how you would organize your store for your customer. The principles are the same. Whether someone is trying to organize their booth here at the show in order to appeal to the jeweler walking by, or you, the jeweler, are trying to figure out how to organize your store to appeal to the customer coming in, the principles are essentially identical. And I think what it kind of goes to primarily is the idea of consistency. The handout that you have has every slide that I'm going to be showing, and I think we'll have time at the end of the remarks to answer any specific questions that you have and be able to talk specifically about what you might be wanting to do. So step number 1 in determining how we might go about making the best possible impression here is to determine it actually seems very obvious, but quite obvious. Sometimes the obvious things don't always occur. And that is to determine exactly what your goals are for here at the show. What are you trying to communicate? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's somewhat obvious that people want to sell as much merchandise as they can here at the show. That makes sense. Just like you in a store might want to sell as much merchandise as you can. But the real answer and the way to accomplishing that, you have to think further than that. And the question is, what do you want your customer, what do you want their impression, what do you want to communicate to them, what are you trying to say? Because in a sense, what you're trying to create with that customer is a long-term relationship. So step number 1, if you have a designer line and you're going to be exhibiting that line here, let's say, is what do you want to convey? What message do you want to convey to that person who's stopping by your booth? And let's make certain that the way your booth is set up, the way your merchandise is presented, is compatible with what you're trying to say. If I told you that I was a world championship weightlifter, you'd look at me and say, well, that just doesn't make sense. In much the same way, if your store or your booth is set up in a way that says we're a very high quality operation, but you're not displaying your merchandise in a quality manner, whether that, again, in your store or here at the show, if you're not displaying your merchandise in a way that's compatible with what you're saying, people don't believe it, just like you would not believe that I was the weightlifter. So I think step number 1 is deciding what is the image, what is the message that you're trying to create. And there are a couple of options here that are typical for either a store's positioning in a marketplace or for your presentation here at this show. And the various choices are quality, service, price or value, selection, or design. When someone asks you what kind of a line you have or what kind of a store you have, it's very interesting to listen to someone describe their store and listen to the first 2 or 3 adjectives that they use to describe it? Well, we're very we have high quality, low prices, a big selection. You know, we carry a lot of designer lines. How do you define what kind of a store you have? And the goal again is to try to have what you say and how you appear to be compatible. So let's go through these as different examples of what you might be saying about your line. Quality. If you're positioning your store or positioning your line as being a very quality line, then let's talk about, does the booth utilize quality elements and quality components? Are the trays that are in your booth or in your store fresh, clean, dirty, or are they worn? Is your booth store well lit? Do you have your merchandise organized into small capacity trays that treat the merchandise as quality goods? That's a common mistake at the retail level. One of the things that we often do when we're going into a store is we'll walk in and walk up to a showcase and we'll say, let's pretend that I'm in here, and I walk in the door, I put down my American Express card, and I say that I'll buy anything in this showcase. What would you sell me? And quite often the piece that someone would sell is a piece that's tucked over here in the corner in a tray with maybe 11 other rings. If you're trying to convey a quality image, you've got to treat the merchandise in a way that's respectful of the quality that you're trying to convey when you're telling somebody about it. Otherwise, they're not going to believe it. If you're saying that you're a quality house, is there a way that you have that would demonstrate to the visitor some demonstrable example of the quality of your merchandise? To say, I have really good quality, doesn't mean an awfully lot to anybody because everybody says they have really good quality. Can you take a piece out of the case and can you show me with a loop or show me as a result of your craftsmanship how this piece is worthy of being called a quality piece? So these are the types of attributes that if quality is what you want to say about your merchandise, that you need to pay attention to. The second thing that just about everybody says they offer is good service. Well, there are some ways to demonstrate good service. Certainly, can you give me specifics on why you say your line or your company or your store gives good service? How long does it take you to process? What constitutes good service? That's one of the main questions. How long does it take you to process my order? Is your telephone system easy to navigate? Is there just one person that I can talk to? Do you have an efficient method for billing or for crediting my account? These would be things that would be indicative of having exemplary service. I can turn around, from our company, we claim to have good service, and quote an example of a fellow who called us at 3 o'clock one afternoon and said that his store had been ravaged by flood. He'd saved all the merchandise and he was wanting to reopen in another location the next afternoon. And we were able to pull together 11 showcases worth of displays, ship them out to him that night so that he'd have them the next day so that he could be open for business. I can say we give good service. If I can give an example of the good service that we give, the odds are much, much better that someone's going to believe it. And do you have enough staff here in the booth or in the store, again, going back to that similarity, do you have enough staff to really give me good service? When I walked up to your booth or up to your store case and you were busy with someone, did you just say, excuse me, I'll be with you in a couple of minutes? Did you even acknowledge that I was there? Knowing that you know that I'm there and I'm waiting to see you is a hallmark of being the type of a store or a company that gives good service. Price or value. This seems to be an attribute that you see an awfully lot of discussion about. Everyone says they have good prices or everyone says they give good value, but very few people are in a position to really demonstrate the price or the value they have. I can pull up this piece and say it's only $4.99 or it's $9.99, whatever, but I think you want to be able to explain how you can offer these prices. If very few people are going to accept the idea that you're just taking a smaller margin. Well, we work on very, very small margins. I live in a small house. I ride the bus to work, and I only eat at McDonald's, so consequently I can work off a much lower salary and therefore we offer low prices. Nobody's going to accept that. If you're talking about the volume that you do, if you're talking about different aspects of the merchandise that allow you through your manufacturing process or through the purchasing process of a retail store to be able to offer your product at quality goods at lower prices. Now I believe it. I know we can talk about the prices we have because we own our own factory and we manufacture millions and millions of dollars worth of displays every month, and there are economies of scale, and that's how our prices end up where they are. So there needs to be a reason, an explanation as to how do you say you have good prices. Everybody loves to talk about a big selection, and I think one of my favorite questions is asking just what constitutes a big selection. And the answer simply is that a good selection is to have everything that the person is looking for. If you're only looking for 5 pieces to add to your store, or if a customer's only looking for 1 pair of earrings to buy, if you've got the right pair, you're there. You don't need to show 500 pair in order to sell the one. In fact, there's a book out called The Paradox of Choice by a fellow, by Barry Schwartz. And what he says in that book is actually that if you give people too many choices, that they can't make up their mind. And selection can actually be a bad thing. If we said, let's all go to dinner, and where are we going to go? And we pull out the list of restaurants in Chicago, and there are probably thousands, and we said, you know, beef and chicken, or fish and Italian and Mexican and Thai and Indian and vegetarian. If we list out 20 restaurants, we'll never figure out where we're going. If we say, do you want Italian, seafood, or steak, or vegetarian, we can probably make a decision. So there's times when having a smaller selection to choose from actually increases your chance of making the sale. And I think if you want to talk about design and you want to talk about selection, you need to be able to show pieces that have a design flair. You need to be able, and this is just sort of a recurring theme here, you need to be able to back up what you're saying with examples so that people are not being forced to just take your words on face value and not really have some example as to why. Let's talk about step 2. When the customer's in your store or when the jeweler is in your booth here at the show, you want to organize yourself and organize your presentation in a way that makes the most of everybody's time. There's hundreds of booths out here. There's only 3 days of the show, and it's impossible to spend an awfully lot of time with every exhibitor on every aisle. So the people who are attending here or the person who's shopping in your store has a limited amount of time, and they want you to show some respect for their time. You need to be organized and able to be able to satisfy what they're there for in an efficient manner. If you've made enough sales presentations in your store, you've attended enough shows, you've sat on the other side of the desk enough times that you have a pretty good idea of what the questions are that people are going to ask. You know, when someone walks up to our booth and they want to talk about the displays that we have, I have a pretty good idea of 5 questions that they start with, what the first thing out of their mouth is going to be. And we've tried to sit down and develop informative, truthful, realistic answers to those questions so we can get the ball rolling and move the conversation along. So the point here is, in your booth, be prepared for what you know is coming and organize your answers into short, logical solutions that allow everybody to maximize the use of their time. These are some of the questions that people are going to ask you. Who are you? What is your line? What do you sell? And obviously, you'd think that it would be obvious from looking down in the case, but it isn't always. Where is it made, or where is it sold? When can I get it? Why should I carry it? How much, and essentially what should I be getting from you? This is, if you ever took an old journalism class, this is the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And essentially, in the same principle as journalism suggests that you want to summarize the story with those 5 W's and H in that opening paragraph. In today's parlance, this is called an elevator speech. You want to be able to explain who you are and kind of give an overview of why you're there in order to introduce your company. You want to be prepared to ask the customer some questions about their store in order to give you the best proposal. We get a lot of people who come up to me, again as an example, and say, well, how much do displays cost? Well, it's a little bit like taking the analogy that if you went to see your doctor and you walked in the door and he said, hello, Mary, good to see you, here's your prescription, without asking you any questions. There is no single pat answer to how to best display a store. We have a 4-page questionnaire when we're doing a complete store over that we go through and we ask questions about the competition and the tradition of the store and how do people perceive the store. And one of the things that we do is we ask you to have your store employees fill it out to see whether or not all of the employees, the salespeople, are on the same page as far as what do they think is the best-selling product in the store? What do they think? Which showcase has the worst merchandise in it? Which color of displays do they think makes the jewelry look the best? And by getting information on what your store is about, then our team of experts can go in and can design a solution that's made to fit your problem. We can write you a prescription that fits your symptoms as opposed to saying, hello, take this. And I think in much the same thing is applicable here. I would not want to try to sell my line into a particular retailer unless I knew what kind of store that retailer had. I'd want to know who the competition is. I'd want to know what kind of demographic their customer base is. What is the brand? I was at a store yesterday that's an ultra diamond store here in Chicago. It's a price-pointed, medium to low-end store. What I'd sell to ultra to put in, if I were selling diamonds, what I'd sell to them is different than what I'd sell to Albert's down in Shearerville or what I'd sell to a higher end store. I think you want to tailor-make the solution to the characteristics of the customer, and that's applicable again to the public walking into your store looking at the merchandise in your showcase. So taking that a step further, maybe the answer is to take the same www and H and turn the question back. Well, tell me a little bit about your store. What kind of store do you have? Where is it? When are you looking to add the product? And look at this design we have. Why would you think that your customer would like this item? Can you think of a particular Mrs. Jones or somebody who might find this type of item appealing? And how do you see my line fitting into your store with the rest of your store? Taking that to the retail level, you could apply it in that if this piece of jewelry were in your jewelry chest at home, Mrs. Smith, give me some examples. Can you think of any place that you might want to wear it? What other pieces do you have that it might go with? And how would you envision this jewelry fitting into your jewelry wardrobe? Once you've gotten some input from the customer, excuse me, that doesn't do it, this does it. Maybe at that point you can develop a logical solution to the customer's questions that they have. Now you know who you are, you know who they are, they've outlined what their need is, you know what your line is, and now what you're doing, instead of trying to cram this merchandise down their throat and force them to take it in a weak moment, what you're actually doing is working in a solution, coming up with a solution of how this piece of merchandise fits a particular need that they have. And I think anytime you feel like someone is working with you to solve a problem instead of someone's just trying to sell you something, you're going to have a better experience. Obviously in your store or in your booth, you want to be organized to have everything you need close by. There's nothing worse than you coming in, sitting here, waiting for me to start my speech, and I'm trying to fumble around and find my remote control or my pointer, and I'm saying, just a moment, I'll be right back. You know, I need to go get this polishing cloth out of the back, or I need to go do this. Shane Decker will tell you that particularly with higher end customers, you never want to have something occur that prompts you to have to leave the customer side. You don't want to step away from that customer when they're at the booth. This type of an interruption obviously interrupts the flow and the momentum of the sale. So one of the other complaints that we got in preparing for this presentation was a lot of people who attended the show said that retailer or manufacturers here did not have their prices up to date with current commodity prices. I think that's just part of being organized for the show. I think it's part of showing that you're prepared if as opposed to having to do every calculation over again because of fluctuating gold prices. So having your merchandise priced with current commodity market prices is a smart thing to do. Step number three, tell me how I sell it. This is, again, one of the big complaints that we hear is I had a meeting, I guess it was in Atlanta last week with some folks, and they had a line of jewelry, and they were busy telling me how wonderfully it was made, and it is, and they're exhibiting here, and the craftsmanship and what they're able to do is just amazing. And I said, but what do you give the retailer to help him sell it through? And they kind of looked at me like I had asked a question in a foreign language. Well, you know, let me tell you again about how it's made. I said, you already told me how it's made. What do you do to help them sell it? Because there's an awful lot of instances where people are just trying to get the retailer to put it in his store without giving thought as to what he's going to do with it and how he's going to move it along. And I think more successful manufacturers are people who give me more advice on how to sell the merchandise through. So some of the questions that I would want to be able to share with that retailer would be, which piece do I buy? I think an exhibitor here needs to say what are the best, needs to be prepared to explain which are the best sellers and why those items sell best. And when the retailer tells me some facts about my store, this is the type of store I have. Which ones of your pieces of merchandise do you think will work best in my store and why? It's personalizing the answer to the individual customer. It's providing a solution instead of just trying to sell me something. And it's understanding that I don't buy this jewelry to display it and hold it forever. I buy it to resell it. That's my objective. And consequently, I need your help in helping me come up with how am I best going to sell it. How am I going to display this new line that I buy? Well, how much space do we need to use? What pieces should be emphasized? What kind of merchandise should be next to it? Do you have any kind of signage that helps me tell a story about this design? And how are other successful jewelers displaying this jewelry? One of the most common complaints we get when we're talking to retailers about the displays that they get, I'm actually a little ahead of myself, but we'll talk about that for a moment, is that the display or the amount of space that the manufacturer wants in the store is too big for actually the dollar value that that line is going to do. One of the exercises that we do, let's say that you've got a store that has 100 feet of showcase and you want to do $1 million a year in merchandise. If you do the math, 100 feet of case, $1 million in sales, you need to sell $10,000 for every foot of showcase in the store. And if your gross margin is 50%, you need to make $5,000 profit, gross margin, for every foot of showcase in the store. So all of a sudden, when I come in, this manufacturer comes in and I've got this line of jewelry and I've got this 24-inch display, I need, in that example, I need to sell $24,000 worth of that merchandise to warrant the space that I'm going to give up in my store. And trying to determine, is this going to help my overall average or is this going to drag it down? Do you offer a free display that goes with it? If not, that's fine. I'll use one of my, I being the retailer, would use my generic display. If you do offer a free display, you know, why should I use your display? Does it have the ability to emphasize specific pieces? One of the things I'll cover in this presentation this afternoon, you can get a preview highlight of it, is the concept of 20-40-40. It's not Howard Kane, this is a different one. The 20-40-40 principle is to take the top 20% of merchandise that's in a showcase or in a collection and take that top 20% and put it on individual elements. Take the next 40% of merchandise, that was the best. Now take the better, which is the next 40%, and put it in trays that hold 3. and then take the bottom 40% of merchandise, which is the good, better, best, and take that and put it in trays that hold 5 or 7 or 12 or whatever they need to be, because that's the good, this is the better, and this is the best. And the best gets displayed on individual elements. Why? Because it's the best. And how much easier is it for you to sell me on the idea that it's the best if you treated it like the best? Remember what I said in the opening comments? The goal here is to create a consistent message, to make it look like what we're saying it is. So why should I use your display if you provide one? Can it emphasize specific pieces? And that's the 20-40-40 rule. What kind of fabric is it made out of? You may know that if one of the big culprits for tarnishing jewelry is using inferior quality fabrics in the construction of the display. If I put a ring finger in a showcase made out of inferior quality leatherette that has a sulfur dioxide content to it, it'll tarnish every piece of jewelry in the case, because the sulfur dioxide that's in that leatherette will emit out in that warm showcase environment with the closed airspace, and it'll react with the alloy metals that are in your jewelry to tarnish the merchandise. Does the display that you're offering have my name on it? Is it the appropriate size? And what if I want to use my own display instead? I can't tell you. Fully 75% of the stores that we do when an independent calls us, you mentioned you were from Alabama, we're doing an awful lot of them we're doing some in Tuscaloosa right now and a couple of stores in Birmingham. And what they say is, I've got these vendor-provided displays, and I don't know, should I use them or not? They come in all these different colors. I really don't like them. I'd just as soon throw them away. Well, they're wasteful for the vendor who paid the money to have them made. But we find that people are very willing to use their own display instead, because they're in that store, your customer's in that store because of the name of the store. If your vendor brand has a name that really drags people in, and that name means something, like Hearts on Fire or a Scott K or something, using that display makes a lot of sense. But there are times when you might be ahead not even offering a vendor-provided display, but supporting them using their own display. Are there any other types of sales support that you offer as a vendor to the retailer in order to add your line to their store? Do you offer any signage, counter pads, any imagery? The use now of the video plasma screens in all the stores is just growing by leaps and bounds. If I had a line of jewelry, I would certainly be providing video clips of my merchandise, not just studio shots, but people wearing it, lifestyle imagery of things to support what's being shown on the video screens in the store. What selling points should I emphasize to my customer to sell it through? So let's role play. And this would be kind of in some way your worst nightmare. I come up to your booth because you're exhibiting your new line of jewelry there, and I say, I'm interested in adding it. Let's pretend I'm a customer and you're me. Sell me this piece of merchandise. And I'm amazed at how many times, well, no, I'm not really comfortable with that. Let me tell you why you ought to buy it for your store. No, if you can't come up with a satisfactory role-playing environment to communicate how that retailer could resell that merchandise, then you need to back up and ask yourself about your overall marketing plan. But I think somebody who can make a logical, organized sales presentation to help teach that retailer how to resell your line is going to go along for a lot further in being able to add it to theirs. Okay, let's look at the bad situation. I buy your line, I put it in my store. What happens if I don't sell it? I think we have to be prepared to talk about what do we do then? Is there any type of stock balancing? What other things might we do if we're not successful? And then, for goodness sake, when you've finished with that meeting at the retailer here at the show, and you're at that point, then ask for the order. It's not automatic that we're going to go ahead and do business. A couple of years ago, I took a Dale Carnegie selling class, And on the opening day, they had people go through a sales presentation, and less than 20% of the people who went through a mock sales presentation actually asked for the order at the end of the conversation. So to actually bring it to that point and saying, are you okay with this? Can we go ahead and write this up? Can we go ahead and ship this to you? Asking for the order is, for some reason or another, has become a lost art. When we're finished with the meeting here and at the booth downstairs, and we need to sit down, or at that moment, we need to summarize what it is that we agreed that we were going to do. I'm going to summarize in 25 words or less what we agreed to do. I'm going to say thanks to you for stopping by. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to send you these 11 pieces. You're going to do this. I'm going to send you ad slicks for advertisements. I'm going to send you a file with the video screen imagery on it. But I think it's better, because it's so often the case, two people leave from a conversation with different ideas of what just took place. If you summarize that in one place at one time, I think you have a better chance that your customer won't go away confused. And as I said, you're going to say thanks, because remember, you claimed that you have good service, and as a result, that customer is going to walk away from your booth and go see Bill down at the coffee bar and tell him what a great experience he had with you, and send other people your way. After the show, if it's at all possible, you're going to send an email to me confirming what we talked about. If you order, I'm going to ship your order, then I'm going to follow up after 30 days after I ship your order to you, and I'm going to ask how it worked out. Did the merchandise meet your expectations? What's the reaction of the customer? Did you show that piece to Mrs. Jones? And what's going on? It makes it clear that you do in fact give good service. You might make some suggestions to the customer as what do they do at that time, and then you might talk about ideally a reorder. When you get home from this show, you sit down and you look at the experience. These shows are expensive in time and in money, and you want to look at what went right and what went wrong. What changes should you make to the way that either you worked the show or you exhibited here at the show, since we have people doing both. If you had a booth here and you were exhibiting, was the amount of space you had right? Did you have the right displays in there? Did you have the right lighting? Did you promote it correctly? And what did your competition at the show here do that you thought you might want to consider or make sure that you don't do going forward? As I said, these are expensive exercises. Being prepared and having a cohesive message that communicates a single thought and can make the difference between being successful and not being successful. That's the end of my remarks. I would be happy to talk specifically about any questions or challenges you have with your own line or with your store, and answer any questions that you might have. It wasn't that good. You guys can. Thank goodness.
And that is it better to keep all of the same items in the showcase, or do you think it's better to mix them up, like have rings and necklaces and bracelets together, or should you keep it?
The question is whether it's a best idea in a display visual merchandising technique to put all the merchandise, all the rings, all the earrings, all the pendants in one case and display it that way, or to display them in collections inside each case. Is that about right? The answer for me tends to be the latter, that I like to put them together in collections, because what I find is, and this is kind of a blanket rule that applies to the whole thing, I try to display the merchandise in a way that is compatible with how people shop for it. When people come in to shop for something, let's take birthstones or take colored stones for an example. When someone comes in to shop, they usually have a pretty good idea of what stone they're looking for. They come in, they don't say, I'm coming in to look at colored stones. They say, I'm coming in to look at sapphires. So it makes sense to have all the sapphire merchandise together instead of, well, are you looking for sapphire earrings? Because those are over there, and sapphire pendants are over there. If the person is looking for that item, then by having it organized in the way that the customer is asking for it is the most powerful. It also increases your chances of selling a second item. And the husband comes in, I'm looking for a pair of sapphire earrings for my wife. The competent salesperson is going to show them that, close that deal and say, when's her birthday? When's your anniversary? Mother's Day's coming up. You know, the holidays will be here in a couple of months. If you think she'll like that pendant or those earrings that you just decided to buy, wouldn't you think that for her birthday, the pendant, and for Christmas, the ring, and all of a sudden, Mr. Jones, you know, you've done all your shopping for the year, and by this time, January, she'll have a complete ensemble of all of these pieces. Won't that be wonderful? It also increases your chance if that customer has $1,000 to spend and you show him a beautiful piece that's $699 and you leave $300 in his pocket as he walks out the door, you have a better chance of selling them a second piece so that they don't leave with that extra budget in their pocket. The key, I think, goes back to displaying it in a way with that good, better, best. Yes, ma'am?
In the display case, do you feel like we should mix and match your props as far as color, or keep it all one color?
That's kind of a Ford or Chevrolet question. I don't typically try, I wouldn't encourage more than 2 colors if you were going to do that. And there are lots of things that count as colors.
Like black and white is okay.
Let's talk about the terms for a second. When it is all one color, the technical term for that is a monochromatic color scheme. If you have an awfully lot of lighting, really strong, good lighting, and the merchandise, and you don't have too much merchandise in the showcase, if it's not overly filled, then a monochromatic color scheme can look really, really good. What I tend to do is do a 2-tone color scheme, but I do it in a proportion, for example, because once somebody is in the store, there is a point at which, in a way, the other part of the store competes with the less expensive part of your store competes with the better part of the store. So what I try to do is, let's just say that we were going to do the showcases out of blue and white. Then I would do the diamond case where 80% of what I see when I look at that case is white, and there are some blue accents that are the other 20%. So it's white with some blue accent. In the colored stone area, in the gold and in the middle price merchandise, I do it 50-50, where there's a blend of blue and white, but there's about an equal amount of both. And then in the charms and silver and the less expensive, the beads or whatever, I would do that 80% blue, 20% white. They're the same colors, but they're in different proportions based upon what kind of merchandise is in the store. So you have to be careful because the color needs to mean something, is I guess what I'm saying. I quite often will do the whole showcase out of, let's say, beige, and then we'll do the floorboard out of a different material that might be a slightly different color, and then take those 20% that I talked about, that best merchandise, take those and make some individual ring towers and all out of the color that the floorboard is. And now I've tied the floorboard to the elements, but the core element layout is beige leatherette, and I've got dark brown floorboards or whatever and dark brown highlight pieces. But when it starts to have lots of colors, and when you're faced with all kinds of different colors, a vendor called me the other day and asked us to do a vendor-provided display, this guy out of LA, and I said, fine, you know, we'll be happy to make one for you. And he started telling me what color he wanted. I'd never heard of mixing those colors together before. And I said, where in the world did you come up with those? And he said, well, I bought this customized Porsche, and that's the color of the interior, and I really like it, and I want my displays that color. You know, and I said, given any thought here to what the retailer might like in the store? You know, you can get these vendor displays in all kinds of weird colors, and your store comes off looking like a, you know, like a color wheel. Are there any other questions that I can answer about that? Excuse me, I just wanted to check our time to make sure we didn't run over. Well, if I can help you individually, I'd be happy to do so. There's a handout down here. We're not exhibiting, but we're at one of the smart stations here for what's called a Showcase Showdown, setting up showcases with different layouts of merchandise and trying different ways to combine some beautiful colored stone goods that we got from AGTA. So I hope to see you down there, and if there's anything I can help you with, let me know. Otherwise, thanks very much for coming so early this morning, being part of this large group. I'm sorry? Yes, that is at 2 this afternoon. Actually, that PowerPoint was was on here by mistake. It is, the idea behind it is there are 5 steps to improving the way your store is displayed, and you do a different step every 2 weeks so that you get that step implemented, and at the end of 10 weeks, you've got all of them done. And I'm doing that from 2 to 3 down the hall. All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.